So I got a racing sim. So most of you watching have probably already seen the footage of me spending 20 hours at Thermal in California with BMW Performance Driving School. Sort of a continuation of the first 20 hours, and I figured why not take it on the track. There's a lot to be said about mental simulation. The point is that because I was having so infrequent of visits to any track for availability reasons, financial reasons, and for a while thinking about ways that I can actually do something legit that would actually build my skill and turn into something that maybe I could compete in. The nail in the coffin was watching the Road to Le Mans series with Michael Fassbender on Porsche's YouTube channel, and watching him in certain clips using the simulator to review and practice for his upcoming sessions every weekend. And that was sort of it for me. That was the point where I was like, okay, I am going to start putting away some money and figuring out the logistics behind getting one of these things without going too crazy, because I do live in an apartment and I move fairly often, and I don't have a lot of space. So figuring that out, ultimately it all came together, so here we are. So what I want to do in this video is take you through a little bit of the unboxing process and talk to you about the rationale behind why I picked the parts that I picked and the brands that I picked, really one brand that I picked, and also a little bit about what the significance is of the certain sort of technologies that I picked with it. But first, we actually have to go and get the boxes. Oh, that's okay. You stay there. I got it. Based on where I've moved the table, you can guess that I anticipate this thing is going to be quite large. This may have been a mistake. So I've hauled everything in. I then ate some food. I'm now fatter than I was a couple of minutes ago, so let's get cracking. So the first step before anything else was putting together the 80/20 extrusion rig, which initially gave me a little bit of pause. As you can see, the parts have been laid out. I'm getting a little bit of reassurance that this isn't going to be super big. Now, granted, I'm being a bit dramatic because I did look at the measurements before I bought it, and most rigs are about like 2 feet by 4 or 5 feet, which should fit fine in the corner to store away and in the middle of my living room when I'm actually playing. I mean driving, not playing. This is not a game. What it really came down to is I now have a hand truck in the corner, and I use that to move the rig back to and from my storage corner. Yeah, using a hand truck. Now the last thing I did, I added to the mounting plates a 1/4 inch adhesive padding that I found at a local craft store. But also I went one extra mile and bought some contact paper and put that on the wheelbase so that there's just like double protection. But I do want to take this opportunity to mention the brand that I ended up going with, which is Advanced Sim Racing. Now, there are a number of rig frame companies out there. There's Track Racer, there is SimLab, there are a couple of other ones out there, and there are other styles out there too. There are certain rigs that are a little bit more stylized and made out of like certain piping, and then there's the 80/20 extrusion rig, which you'll most commonly see, which is the sort of very square and really looks like frames of a building. The way to easily tell is it's that same ubiquitous style that you see so many different companies make. Now, there ends up being a benefit to this in that in the future when you want to upgrade and add certain parts to it, like a shifter mount or a handbrake mount, or the mount for triple monitor setup, most, if not all, of the 80/20 rigs are built to the same relative spec, so you can get parts that will most likely fit the rig that you get. Now, if you get a specialized one or one that's styled in a certain way that's different, you're now stuck with proprietary parts. These companies are shipping from overseas. They are charging roughly the same sort of premium amount of like $600 to $700 for a good ranked solid frame. Then you've got shipping, which in some cases adds 50 to 100% of the cost to the actual rig that you're buying. In comes advanced sim racing, which ships within the US for free and ended up being at sticker price about $100, $200 less expensive than comparable structured rigs out there. So now that the rig was put together and the frame is ready to go, the next step is really just start unboxing the equipment. So first box actually was a bit of a mystery. I wasn't sure what it was until I finally cracked it open and realized it was the load cell pedal kit for the brake. Now this is a little bit different in terms of its structure and function to the stock brake kit, which is in the next box we're about to look at. By the way, these parts are no joke. That heel plate nearly dented the wood on my desk, but nonetheless, here you see the accelerator and the stock brake pedal, which is actually built with a doubled over foam pad for resistance. So load cell kit's definitely a good idea here. Next up was a very big box and the main showstopper. This is the Podium F1 bundle, designed specifically for PlayStation and compatible with PC. I'm gonna hit the camera. But once you click open the built-in locks in the box, what a thing of beauty. Oh my God. All right, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this, but first thing we gotta do is take the wheel off. This thing is incredible. Now you may have noticed looking down the barrel that there were a couple of pins inside of the axle. You can catch this a little bit better on the back side of the wheel. Those actually make the wheel essentially wireless. The construction of this thing was just incredible. In fact, the only thing that took my attention more were the pedals. All right, here we go. I'm gonna click the paddles. Ready? Oh! Yes, they feel as good as they sound, and they communicate magnetically with the bass. The only other thing as overwhelming as all of this was how much of a contrast it was to the build quality of what we opened next. Yeah, very different sound from pulling the paddles, which, by the way, didn't even know I needed an emergency stop button until I realized that the bass is generating like 20 pound-feet of torque, which is enough to rip your arms off of your body. Scientific fact. Fanatec, from what I've seen, is one of those companies that has been around for a while and is not necessarily the highest end, but it's a fairly common company when it comes to sim racing. They apparently do some stuff with F1, they do some stuff with other professional racers. They have certain bundles, like this bundle that I got. I didn't end up needing to buy a wheelbase and then a separate wheel and separate paddles and a separate quick release mechanism, which all of those things you can buy separately. But if you go on the website, they actually have a configurator that helps you build your entire process through, and it actually lets you know where you're missing certain things. It was really the only base/wheel that they had that was PS4 and PC compatible, and that's exactly what I needed. The base and the wheel can be bought separately, but when buying separately, they were sold out. The only way to get it was by getting the bundle, so lucky me. As for the pedals, going with one company that I knew worked all together, being able to use all one system allowed everything to connect to the wheelbase and the wheelbase to connect to the PlayStation or the PC. In other situations, you're plugging each thing individually by USB. This does make it very useful, but here's where the functionality problems start to come in a little bit. With the PC, because this thing is actually it favors the PlayStation. It works fairly seamlessly with a PS4 and PS5. It has PS4/PS5 and a PC mode. The problem is it is not very well set up for the PC. I ran into very weird issues with things like iRacing, where it was actually registering the input of the pedals backwards and reversed. I think I accidentally figured out how to fix it. I don't even remember how it happened. The simple thing is that it doesn't work entirely smoothly straight onto the PC. Aside from that, the wheel is absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful. It's got Alcantara handles. I do like the form factor of it. The paddles, as well as the front fascia of the wheel, and all of the side and top of the wheelbase, that's actual carbon fiber. I thought it was just a print initially, but no, that is real carbon fiber, and it looks gorgeous. More mainstream consumer products like Logitech or Thrustmaster tend to go with a belt or a gear-driven setup, and what that ends up doing is it allows for a magnification of the force generated by the motor, which means you can put a smaller motor in there and it can magnify the force by a belt and a gear system, just like a transmission. This saves cost because you can put a smaller motor in there. It makes it a little bit safer, and it also adds a few things that become a little bit of an issue. Turns out that the gears can actually skip inside of the casing. And then when it comes to a belt can ultimately over time stretch out and lose some of its elasticity and some of its actual precision. The other thing about that is because you have a transmission of forces from the motor to the gears to the actual axle, you're losing a bit of that fine sort of detail. That sort of gets transmitted out and you lose some of that detail. That is one of the major benefits of the direct drive. It is straight into the motor, which means you have fewer moving parts, fewer parts that can fail, and fewer parts that can absorb and blunt the details and responsiveness that come from the game into the motor. The downside is you have a very large motor, which costs more money. And this could be considered a good and or a bad thing, but the motor generates a lot of force, which can be very useful for fine tuning and, tailoring the experience to what you want, but can also be dangerous, which is why you have the emergency stop button, which when you hit it, just cuts the power to the machine. Now on to the pedals, and this is an area that I had to do a lot of research, and I feel like there's a lot of information out there that's just sort of redundant, and sort of people are saying the things that the marketing slips say about these particular pedals, and that's the load cell kit. Almost all of you out there are actually familiar with what a load cell is because most of you have probably stepped on a scale before. A scale is a form of a load cell. Now there are a number of types of load cells, and I can talk about them in another video if you think that I should. Let me know in the comments below. But what the load cell does is it directly takes a pressure force and converts it to an electrical signal. There's no recalculation of position of the pedal or anything like that. It takes the pressure, changes it into an electrical impulse, and that registers in the game as braking force. The best way I can explain it is this. If you get into your regular road car and you turn the car on, don't have to be moving, and you push the pedal down, there is a large amount of ease with which the pedal can go down, and then when you get to the bottom of the pedal, there's a space there of about maybe 2 or 3 inches where you're pressing on it and it's not moving as much. But if you were on the road and you moved the pedal within that 2 or 3 inches, you would notice the car brakes a lot more. A racing pedal has just that to brake. That's where the load cell comes in, because the load cell replicates most closely right now, aside from the hydraulic pedals you can get out there, what it feels like to be in a race car. A race car brake pedal is primarily modulated with a pressure input, not with a distance input, and that's why you have the load cell kit being what it is. Just like anything else, you have to get used to it. If you were coming from 20 years of driving a road car and you get thrown into a race car, you need to get used to the brake pedal. It's gonna be different. If you're looking to get a load cell pedal, don't get it because it's gonna make you better right off the bat. Get it because you want to replicate what it feels like to be in a race car and get good at driving with that style. I will link all of the equipment that I bought in the description below. None of it's sponsored. I don't get a cut of any of it yet. With that being said, that's all I've got for this video. Hopefully I'm going to be bringing you some more content revolving around this stuff, and I will see you on the next one.